Good evening, you're watching World News Tonight, live from Warsaw, and I'm Anna Kalczyńska. For 10 months now, Serbs have been fighting for justice for the victims of the Novi Sad disaster. Once again, they took to the streets, carrying banners with democratic and anti-corruption slogans. And once again, the authorities used force to suppress these protests. More on that in just a moment, but first, let's look at tonight's headlines. Poland divided over support for Ukrainian refugees. Russia attempting to rewrite history, this time targeting Lithuania's independence. TVP World gained access to the Superhuman Center in Lviv, which helps victims of the war. Violence erupts in Serbia as the government used tear gas and stun grenades against demonstrators. There are injuries and many have been arrested. Protests against, and I quote, the corrupt government have been ongoing for 10 months now, and they show no signs of weakening. Instead of concession, the government is choosing confrontation. Agata Dura reports.
It wasn't a quiet night for Serbia's second largest city.
This particular protest in Novi Sad, and I may add in 10 and more other cities in Serbia that were, by the way, all quiet and peaceful except this one in Novi Sad, were there because of the violence of the police last week.
The police in Novi Sad used stun grenades and tear gas to disperse the protesters.
Over 20 canisters were fired into the crowd. People choked, stumbled, fell. Several were arrested. Some were dragged into one of the university buildings, confined in an amphitheater, and held there for hours without clear charges. Others were simply struck in the street and left without medical assistance.
Protesters have been voicing their demands clearly for nearly a year now.
I would like the elections to be held in such a way that we can count the votes ourselves and prevent them from stealing the results.
We want peace and democracy to prevail, and for political institutions to do their job. That means holding elections, which will solve the problem because the government will change.
The authorities addressed the events on Saturday.
The Serbian police will do their job and maintain order and peace throughout the Republic of Serbia. All citizens must respect the laws and regulations of this country.
And the president against whom the Serbs protested didn't hold back his words.
They were helped by that European scum who came here to destroy our country. Go ruin your own countries, don't try to ruin Serbia, you scum. You're not even scum, you're worse than that. That's all I have to say to you.
Scenes like these have now become an everyday reality in many Serbian cities. The protests erupted in the aftermath of this tragedy that claimed the lives of 16 people. On November 1st of last year, a canopy at Novi Sad's main train station collapsed. The demonstrators say it's because it was poorly built, and that, according to them, was the result of corruption in the tender process. That's why the protesters also demand for the government to publish the investment's full documentation.
Some experts were saying if the regime publishes all the documents, it would be tantamount to political suicide, by which they meant that it would be revealed how the corruption schemes of nepotism, clientelism work, and how the cost of the train station reconstruction turned out to be tenfold higher than the actual price.
The government did publish some of the documentation.
But experts in the legal, financial, and engineering field know exactly which pages are missing.
American think tank Freedom House classified Serbia as a transitional or hybrid regime. This means it combines autocratic and democratic traits, featuring both political repression and regular elections. Serbia has been a candidate for the European Union since 2012. But its chances of joining keep fading. For TVP World, I'm Agata Dura.
In the fourth year of the war in Ukraine, a majority of Poles are no longer supportive of providing Ukrainian refugees with social benefits unconditionally. According to the latest poll, 54% believe a monthly child allowance of nearly €200 should only be attributed to working Ukrainians. Although the foreign-born population of Poland is still small, far-right activists amplify a fear of immigrants for their own purposes, taking to the streets with loud protests. Anastasia Yanchenko brings us this story.
Support for Ukrainian refugees is dividing Polish public opinion.
We should put Polish citizens born in Poland first, and only then in second place those who come from abroad.
Saturday saw a protest in Warsaw against what the demonstrators called mass immigration. The right-wingers, who gathered at Warsaw's office of the European Commission, were met by a counter-protest just across the street.
They are just the same as anybody else here, and they have the same right to remain, live and thrive.
But it's not only public opinion that is divided. Poland's newly elected President Karol Nawrocki and Prime Minister Donald Tusk's government have clashed over whether a child benefit program should support foreigners. The 800-plus program provides families with a monthly allowance of 800 zloty or nearly €200 per child, regardless of family income. After Parliament accepted an extension of social benefits for Ukrainian refugees, President Nawrocki vetoed the law. He argued that assistance should go only to Ukrainians who are working.
The question is, what should families do if they truly cannot work now? You cannot just divide everyone into working or not working, receiving or not receiving.
Access to free health care is also at stake. Until now, Ukrainians who arrived in Poland after February 24, 2022 have been entitled to free medical care regardless of employment status.
There are mothers who fled from Donetsk, Kharkiv or Kherson, who lost their homes and whose husbands were killed. These women are raising their children alone. For them, 800 zloty and access to health care is crucial help from the Polish state. Ukrainian society right now, and mothers in particular, are in a state of shock. The regulation that allows us to stay here legally has still not been extended.
In response to the president's veto, the government presented a new draft legislation.
The project limits certain categories of access to healthcare services. Most importantly, however, it contains provisions regarding the legal residence of Ukrainian war refugees and shows in which areas Poland should provide additional support to them.
The new law would also tighten control over the employment status of foreigners.
Every month, the social insurance institution will automatically check whether a foreigner, not only Ukrainians, was professionally active in the previous month. If so, the benefit will be paid. If not, the benefit will be suspended.
In July 2025, benefits under the 800-plus program were paid to more than 276,000 foreign children. 4 out of 5 were children from Ukraine. Support for foreign children costs roughly €600 million annually, a fraction compared to the €3.5 billion that foreigners contribute to the Polish economy each year. Anastasia Yanchenko, TVP World.
Today, a funeral was held in Płużniki for the victims of a Volhynia massacre. It is the restoration of dignity, said the Polish Minister of Culture. In 1945, Ukrainian nationalists murdered between 50 and 120 Poles there. In 2024, the Ukrainian side lifted the ban on searches and exhumations of Polish victims, and this decision led to today's funeral. The Volhynia massacre is one of the most tragic chapters in Polish history. Between 1943 and 1945, in what is now Western Ukraine, there were mass killings of the Polish population carried out by Ukrainian nationalist formations. The exact number of victims is not known. Historians estimate that around 50,000 Poles were killed, and in retaliation, 2,000 to 3,000 Ukrainians. 95% of war injuries in Ukraine are caused by mines and explosions, and nearly a third of the wounded have lost upper limbs. To meet this challenge, The Superhuman Center in Lviv has become one of Europe's most advanced clinics for prosthetics, reconstructive surgery and psychological support. TVP World's Piotr Kuchma gained exclusive access to the facility.
On the Ukrainian front line, the military uses three codes. 200 means dead, 300 means wounded, and 450 stands for safe. The Superhuman Center in Lviv is where those in the second category come to rebuild their lives. Among them is a 25-year-old Polish professional soldier, contracted to Ukraine since 2023. On the front line, he stepped on a mine and lost his leg. But that was not the end of his war story.
After losing my leg and getting a prosthesis, I was back in Chasiv Yar, Pokrovsk and the Serebrianka forest, fighting on prosthetics. It's not a big issue. And it wasn't just delivering food. I was working with both FPV and kamikaze drones. If someone wants to, they can. As I like to say, better to live a short but exciting life than a long and miserable one.
Alexander now comes from the front line for rehabilitation and specialized treatment. Thanks to international support from Howard Buffett, Sting, Richard Branson and Ukraine's first couple, Olena and Volodymyr Zelensky, the Superhuman Center offers world-class medical care.
This is how it works. The patient has sensors placed on their muscles. When the muscles contract, the signal passes through an adapter to the prosthesis. The hand then opens and closes. We restore not just function, but independence, helping them rejoin society and live full lives again.
The clinic specializes in personalized body and fascial reconstruction, limb prosthetic, free tissue transfer and complex reconstruction of muscles, nerves and soft tissue. But equally important is psychological support.
Every day we have music therapy. On Saturdays there are workshops where patients weave bracelets. On Tuesdays, hippotherapy, working with horses, plus sports and mental training. We apply every modern rehabilitation method available today.
And it's not only Ukrainian soldiers who come here. Like Eddie, a Briton who once was a sailor. When Russia launched its full-scale invasion, he volunteered to evacuate people and animals from frontline areas. A Russian drone took his arm and leg, but not his will to live, or his plans for the future.
To keep helping Ukraine ultimately. My long-term goal is settle and build a life in Ukraine. For me, this is home now.
In mid-February 2025, President Volodymyr Zelensky announced that since the start of the invasion, 46,000 Ukrainians have been killed and 380,000 injured. That is why Ukraine is planning to open more centers, like this one. Piotr Kuchma, TVP World, Lviv.
On September 6, 1991, the Soviet Union officially recognized the independence of Republic of Lithuania, followed by the Russian Federation. Today, this move is being put into question as Russia attempts to rewrite history. Why is Vilnius a thorn in the conscience of the Kremlin? Vucic journalist Witold Janczys has the story.
Statements about Lithuania's improper independence from Russia are not just a political stunt, but an echo of the centuries-long rivalry between Lithuania and Moscow for dominance, says historian Alfredas Bumblauskas.
Until 1655, when Vilnius was first occupied by the troops of Alexei Mikhailovich, Vilnius was a thorn. And for that Soviet power, which Putin and the current Moscow rulers now aspire to, there was no other place that was so painful, neither Riga nor Tallinn.
According to the historian, the Grand Duchy of Lithuania was the antithesis of the Muscovite state, as today's Lithuania is the antithesis of the Russian Federation.
Destroy those damn Baltic states. Wipe them off the face of the earth.
Political scientist Nerijus Maliukevicius, who studies propaganda, explains that the Kremlin's use of internet bots to rewrite Lithuania's history is part of a broad campaign. Its main goal is to destabilize the country internally and to sow doubt about the necessity of helping Ukraine.
Attempts are underway to break the will of the West, and in particular our determination to support Ukraine's struggle. This means sowing doubts about economic and military aid for Ukraine and trying to promote supposedly peaceful messages and initiatives such as peace at any cost.
Russian propagandists are trying to undermine Lithuania's independence by claiming that the State Council of the USSR, the temporary supreme governing body of the Union of Soviet Socialist Republics, which recognized Lithuania's independence, was illegal.
If we're going to talk about a mistake, then it was a mistake of the Soviet Union and the State Council. But the State Council itself was illegal. It had no right to give away territories.
However, this argument has long been rejected. For the broader international community, the decisive factor was the right of a nation to self-determination and the fact that Lithuania was considered an occupied territory, not a legal part of the USSR.
It doesn't matter what happens inside the state according to its own laws. Under international law, what matters is that the position of the state is expressed by a body authorized to act in international relations. At the time, everyone understood that such a position could be expressed by the State Council, the highest authority of the Soviet Union at the time. Period.
In Russia, Lithuania's independence is being questioned, but they choose to forget about the 1991 treaty between the Republic of Lithuania and the Russian Soviet Republic.
And everything is there. The illegality of the occupation, the continuity of the state, and the fact that Lithuania is the same state.
The attempts to invalidate Lithuania's independence is part of hybrid warfare. Rewriting history becomes a tool of exerting pressure and intimidating neighbors. In this way, the Kremlin justifies its aggression and prepares the ground for redrawing the world map.
As Moldova prepares for parliamentary elections that will be held by the end of September, Russian interference in the electoral process is already in full swing. Just to give you an example, a special application which facilitates voting fraud has been circulated on Telegram. Our Balkan correspondent is in Chisinau and has these details.
If you walk the streets of Chisinau, the capital of Moldova, you will notice that the campaign leading to the parliamentary elections has just started. But these elections are also noticed in Moscow, as Russia has been interfering in Moldovan politics ever since the country gained independence in 1991.
We have had multiple energy blackmails over the years, multiple commercial blackmails. Every time when Russia did not like what the government in Chisinau was doing, regardless of who was in power, even if it was pro-Russian parties. Every time Russia did not agree, we got an embargo, we got a hike on energy prices, so that has been happening for like over 30 years now. Now they have become a bit more aggressive because we are actually moving away from Russia.
It is reported that during last year's presidential elections, up to 10% of all votes cast could have been bought with Russian money. And this year, to disrupt the electoral process, a special app called Tainto has been developed. Through this app, people can obtain voting fraud instructions, and if they complete them, they receive payments. Moldovan authorities are aware of the problem, and multiple police raids have been carried out across the country this week. All this ahead of the crucial vote that will be held on September the 28th. From Chisinau, Moldova, for TVP World, I'm Paweł Trzaskowski.
Another evacuation order has been issued for Gaza. More than 64,000 Palestinians have been killed since the war began, according to the Hamas-run Gazan health authorities, with much of the enclave reduced to rubble and its people facing a deepening humanitarian crisis. Israel says its forces now control about 40% of Gaza City, once home to nearly 1 million people. Diana Skaya reports.
This is the Israeli military's latest strike on the 14-story Mushtaha building in Gaza City. And this, the aftermath, as the IDF intensifies its campaign to seize full control of the Gaza Strip. Israel's defense minister shared footage of the destruction, calling it the continuation, warning that more towers will be targeted. Israel claims Hamas used them for surveillance posts to track IDF movements. On Saturday, the Israeli military dropped leaflets over Gaza City, ordering Palestinians to evacuate south as its forces advance further into the enclave's largest urban area.
To the residents of Gaza City and all those present in it, the Israel Defense Forces are conducting an operation to defeat Hamas inside Gaza City. Starting from this moment, and in order to facilitate the departure of those leaving the city, we announced the Mawasi area as a humanitarian zone, where efforts are being made to provide better humanitarian services.
But many Palestinians say there is no safe place left to go.
There are bombardments everywhere. Here in the south, there are martyrs here and there. We won't move for anything. Just to get tired, from where we should, we secure fares. From where we should, we secure cars. All of this is not available. We cannot leave. That's it. We will die here. We are not leaving. We are tired.
Gaza's Hamas-run health ministry reports at least 21 killed in the latest attack, with food shortages worsening. Israeli leaders insist Gaza City is Hamas's last stronghold and capturing it is essential. Israelis, however, are growing increasingly frustrated. This past week, protesters gathered outside the Israeli parliament in Jerusalem, demanding an end to the war and the return of hostages. But the prime minister condemned the demonstrations.
In a democracy, protest is a legitimate thing. But what is happening in the funded, organized political protests against the government, they have crossed every line.
Netanyahu has vowed to capture Gaza City, calling it vital to defeating Hamas. Meanwhile, amid the rubble and the relentless bombardment, the fate of hundreds of thousands of Gazans still trapped inside the battle zone hangs in the balance. For TVP World, I'm Diana Skaya.
Serbia faces its largest protests in years, and President Alexander Vucic is taking an increasingly hard line. Officially talking of foreign influence, Vucic points to the West, but others warn of Russian interference. Tanya Domi, adjunct assistant professor of international and public affairs from Columbia University, joins us now. Professor, good evening, and thank you for being with us.
Thank you for having me.
So we've seen police using tear gas, stun grenades. So one wonders, how far is Vucic prepared to go?
Well, clearly, it's a new day in Serbia and how the demonstrators are being addressed. And obviously, they took off the handcuffs last night, so to speak, and the violence escalated dramatically. And among those that were being arrested and also physically more or less abused included a number of clearly identified journalists. And some of my journalist friends in Belgrade have said to me, and given the longevity of my study of Serbia, this is the worst conditions for journalists really since Milosevic. But even Milosevic did not beat up journalists on the street. They may have threatened them, but they did not beat them up. And so this is really a horrible situation for people who are risking arrest and wanting to bring their grievances to the government. And I don't believe it's going to stop either.
Exactly. The world has changed, right? So dictators learn one from another. And Alexander Vucic is a seasoned politician. As you mentioned, previously you've been 8 years as a president, former prime minister, minister of information in the government of Slobodan Milosevic. But how long can he resist this pressure, you think? What option does he have to calm the situation without losing face?
Yeah. the demonstrators are calling for elections. And just so your audience knows, this has been interesting what they've done as a student-led movement. Have been urging Serbians to organize locally and run for local office. So they have not created a political party or established a political party. Some critics say this is a weakness, that without a party to go to, can they really push Vucic out? And I think that's an open question. But he's resisting elections too. And I think that he doesn't want to hold elections. And I'll go even a step further. If elections were held and the opposition, the people, more or less win, I believe he would go as far to deny those results. But yesterday he had a press conference yesterday, and he was, as a previous video in your preview, he was calling Europeans who were supporting the demonstrators, he was calling them scum. He said it repeatedly. This isn't a good look for the president of Serbia, and I think this has really rattled him. He's never faced anything like this in his political career, and not only that, I would go so far as to say these are the most continuous, sustained demonstrations in Serbia's history. Nobody in the Balkans has seen anything like this. And they're not stepping back from it. And moreover, what's really interesting about it is that there's a multi-ethnic leadership. There's even Muslims, Bosniaks, who are in the leadership of the movement. I mean, nobody leads the movement individually, but these are really multi-ethnic leaders, and are demanding that the government become accountable for corruption and for the shoddy work that was done on the train station in Novi Sad, ultimately killing 16 people in the collapse of the canopy. And this is just the way business is done. And clearly, Serbians on the street are not having any of it. And somebody I spoke to who is a Belgrader today said to me that grandparents are worried. Their kids, their grandchildren are marching. Parents have children that are marching. And many elders and many people who are older that may be professionals in Serbia are indeed inspired by the tenacity of these demonstrators and their commitment. So that's really interesting to me.
It's a social phenomenon as well as a political one. But as you rightly pointed out, the situation seems to aggravate day by day. Yesterday, we would think Vucic wouldn't risk to follow the example of Lukashenko, for instance, because of his candidacy to the European Union. But today, with this rather sharp comment on the presence of certain members of the European Parliament on the protests, it does raise question about his pro-European stance. So, where is he up to? He seems to be doing everything to derail his own membership bid.
Well, he does this intermittently, since he's been in power in 2012. I mean, he's escalated at the border with Kosovo, put MiGs up in the air, refuses in the dialogue, the EU-sponsored dialogue, which is really frozen. He has refused and repeatedly said that Serbia will not recognize the sovereignty of Kosovo, and the Europeans have demanded that is a requirement for them to enter the EU. And I don't see him changing on this anytime soon. And let me also add, speaking of the EU and entering the EU, something really quite terrible took place 2 days ago. A young woman who was a demonstrator was arrested. She claims that she was molested in jail by the special police, and she filed a lawsuit against the police, and they responded by releasing what you would call, she's underage, what you would call intimate, perhaps even pornographic images of her. And this is something that is practiced in Serbia throughout, and it has been identified by feminists as a image-based sexual abuse. And activists, feminist activists in the Autonomous Women's Center in Belgrade actually launched a campaign against this 2 years ago. And they have demanded that this become a part of the national strategy that Serbia has to present to the EU, not only to the EU, but also to the United Nations if they're signatories to the Convention on Elimination of Discrimination Against Women. And this is really horrible, but I would say to you more broadly, this happens in Serbia all the time, and women journalists in particular are targeted, as well as LGBTQ people.
This is purely shocking, you're right. But just to finish, what would be your prediction? As the Croatian Prime Minister said at the beginning of this week that Serbia is heading for a civil war, would you say that there's going to be a breakthrough at some point? Or Vucic is just using his latest appearance in Beijing, for instance, to use this as a leverage against EU and the West?
Well, he does different things at the same time that seem to be contradictory of each other. I believe without Mr. Vucic cooling down and de-escalating the situation, it will continue to escalate into greater violence. Without stopping short of that, I don't see it getting better. And that's really unfortunate. I'm not willing to say there's going to be a civil war, but I would be willing to say right now that violence will continue. I would hope that the EU would take steps to advise Mr. Vucic and say, you really have to get it together. You are derogating from all of our values.
Thank you, Madam. With this hope and with this statement, with this opinion, we must conclude this. Thank you so much for being with us. Tanya Domi, Adjunct Assistant Professor, International and Public Affairs from Columbia University. Thank you for being with us again. Have a good evening.
Thank you.
And thank you for watching World News Tonight. This is TVP World. I'm Anna Kalczyńska. See you soon.